Ukraine's democracy. I'm Olena Prokopenko, Senior Fellow at the German Marshall Fund in Brussels, and we're joined today by a lineup of Ukraine's key experts on electoral reform and governance reforms at large, and we look forward to hearing from them. For more than 3 years, as you know, Ukraine has been grappling with what many of us think to be an unthinkable challenge, really, to simultaneously resist Russia's full-scale invasion and at the same time preserving democracy despite the martial law, preserving all the reform achievements made possible after the Revolution of Dignity. And yet, as if there's not enough acknowledgement of how heavy these challenges are, there are still recurring demands on Ukraine to conduct elections. There are increasing calls, not only from Russia, whose war in Ukraine is the key obstacle to elections, but also international community is insisting that elections in Ukraine would be a test for Ukraine's democracy. We believe that there are reasons to see elections of any kind as a major disruptive event, and this will create an illusion of choice for Ukrainian citizens. But in fact, democratic expression will remain impossible as it is now due to the martial law and due to all the tools that Russia may employ to destabilize the country in general and also to meddle in the elections. And like I said, we are joined today by some of Ukraine's key experts on this topic, and we're also joined by colleagues from GMF in DC. The Q&A will be moderated by Lucy Filer, Senior Communications Manager at GMF. We are also joined by Vita Domanska, Chief Executive Officer at Chesno Movement in Kiev. We are also joined by Mikhailo Zhendrakov, Board Chair of the Yuri Foundation. Hi, Mikhailo. Arguably the key Ukrainian civil society organization working on judicial reforms and on anti-corruption reforms. We also have with us today Valeria Ivanova, visiting senior fellow at GMF in Kiev, and we hope to be joined a little later by Olga Ivazovska, board chairman of Opora Civil Network, who was committed to join us, but given everything that's going on, we hope she will still be able to. So before we go into the Q&A, I wanted to ask our speakers to make very brief, maybe 1 or 2 minute remarks to kind of set the stage for the discussion and to give us the general sense of what their position is on various scenarios that may play out in the next few months, from elections being scheduled and held to the scenario where elections are postponed until the conditions are in place. Josh, can I start with you? I mean, given that what I believe what's on everyone's mind at the moment is the peace talks and how the elections demands play out in this peace conversations, peace negotiations. Can you please tell us a few words about your publication that you recently published with Valeria Ivanova on the risks presented by elections, and can you address how this bargaining chip and often a blackmailing chip is used in the peace talks at the moment by various actors from Russia to the Western allies? The floor is yours, Josh.
Sure thing. Thanks, Elena. Thanks, everyone, for joining. I will put a link to that piece in the chat. And with regards to the ceasefire offer to Russia that was negotiated by the U.S. and Ukraine in Jeddah on Tuesday, there's been a lot of focus on the positive steps that are mentioned in the joint statement about restoring intelligence and security assistance, returning kidnapped Ukrainian children, developing critical minerals. It puts the ball in Russia's court. We appreciate the dog that did not bark, that was not mentioned in that statement, which is anything about needing to hold Ukrainian elections anytime soon. It was something we were watching because earlier in the week there was some reporting that U.S. officials were warning that Trump was insisting that just signing the critical minerals deal would not be enough to resume assistance, that Trump also wanted concessions, including Zelensky taking steps towards holding elections or possibly resigning. I mean, there remains serious risk. It may even be likely that this bad idea will rear its ugly head again. So that's why we think it's important to be communicating to the international community about why it's right, fair, legal, and wise that most Ukrainians do not want their legitimately elected government to hold the next election until after Ukrainian national security is credibly guaranteed. We will hear more in a couple of minutes from my colleague Valeria about our analysis of the standards and why the conditions in wartime Ukraine are not suitable for free and fair elections. I would just add that if the technical challenges were not enough, there's also the geopolitical setting, which would make it devastate. Make an election a devastating social, political, informational battleground for malign foreign influence. The mischaracterizations of Zelensky as a dictator who should immediately hold elections, these are Kremlin narratives that are used to great effect because they can be spun as like some natural concern for democracy, but they are the opposite. They're bullying a war-torn nation into holding elections against the will of Ukrainian people, really a geopolitical cudgel that's meant to weaken the internal cohesion of the country. And just to envision what that could look like, imagine the interference, at least from the Russian side, and potentially it could be from the U.S. side as well in an election process. I mean, Moscow invented its tools of election interference in Ukraine, bankrolling parties, buying up television news, creating false news platforms, unleashing bots and trolls, cyber bomb threats at polling stations. These were all first done in Ukraine, and it's old hat for the Kremlin, but they would come to play more aggressively than ever in 2025. But then they also now have their military positions in and around Ukraine. They would use that to intimidate voters. The bomb threats would not be false bluffs. Drones and missiles could have tactical precision. Assassination could be a real threat. It would all be wrapped in this info op too about trying to convince voters that voting for Zelensky would be a personal and national suicide. And in that malign influence campaign, Putin may well have vocal international partners. We saw Trump and Vance, trying to embarrass Zelensky in the Oval Office. Trump saying that was good for the public to see, then sending Lindsey Graham out the front door of the White House to tell reporters that Zelensky needs to go. We saw Trump, Vance, and Elon Musk interfering in the recent German election. So I don't think it should surprise anyone if, there were to be an election, that the week before an election, we see Trump social media posts, threatening that if Ukraine were to vote for Zelensky, they would never get another American weapon. Again, that is not the context for free, fair choice, anything resembling democracy. The only winner would be Russia and its autocratic partners. So, and any further talk about that should be roundly denounced as imperial pressure that's unbefitting of the free world.
Thank you very much, Josh. Yeah, I think we're all on the same page here about that, and these risks are very, very real. Vita, can I go to you next? Can you tell us what the Ukrainian society thinks about the possibility of elections? I mean, what's the broad consensus in the Ukrainian public around that, and what risks of electoral interference you see at the moment? I mean, you have a very broad network in the Ukrainian regions, not only in the national level, so you probably can sense better than most of us the moods in the society on various levels.
Okay, thank you, Elena. So probably, I don't know, in Ukraine, everybody knows the results of recent poll that 60% of Ukrainians, they think that it's not possible to conduct election during wartime. And only 3% consider that something like election can happen. So it's clear state from civil society that we don't want election when we have this military threats, and we have totally insecure situation. If you're talking about civil society, a few weeks ago, a joint statement from civil society was announced, and over 450 NGOs say that elections are not possible during martial law. So it shows the joint position and like clear vision that we are not talking about election, and Ukraine can't be forced to have election. As George say, yeah, we see this pressure coming from not only Russia but from US also, and that is done to delegitimize government in Ukraine, because if we have election which not be supported and not be supported by Ukrainian citizens and not be recognized and free and fair election from international community, we will have unlegitimate power, and that's like crucial for Ukrainian survival. We have a pretty clear legislative framework which shows us when we can have election and what conditions should be, and probably when we are talking about like external interference, people usually think about trolls, bots, and everything what happened in social media. But in our case, we see the diplomatic pressure as a part of international interference. Also, Ukrainian government is prepared to the election, and that's a normal process, because we need to set a lot of issues, starting from defining the regions which are hardly damaged and can't have election because of destroyed electoral infrastructures, because Ukrainians are not there, they have to flee. So that's why we have to prepare. We have to develop the new framework, which regions, how refugees can vote, what legislative changes we should make. So all this is in the process. Central Election Commission is also working, updating registered of voters. Also, we are trying to analyze opportunities how the voting can be conducted abroad for those refugees who have to leave the country. Personally, we at Chesno, we are interested in this foreign interference, and we are counting on 2 points. First, this is misinformational campaign, attacks through social media. We saw what happened in Moldova, we saw what happened in Romania, and we expect the same. But here is the issue. If we compare Moldova and Georgia, for example, if only civil society is fighting, it's not enough to prevent this foreign intervention. So that's why we also need actions from government, or which can develop a mechanism how to eliminate that Russian impact coming from this misinformation and threats. And another component is that pro-Russian political forces will rise, and they now almost all parties are banned, but they can and they will do participate in the upcoming election. They can use peaceful names, say that they are supporting peace, neutrality of the country, something like this. But also we have to think what to do with their presence in Ukrainian political system. It's a bit challenging, because I know that all European partners are not happy with that, saying that's anti-democratic steps, but still we have to consider it, maybe to add some kind of restriction for some period of time, like for 5 years not to run, or for 10 years. So that should be discussed. So not to be so long, we have to eliminate this foreign interference, not just through social media, but also through diplomatic channels. We have to conduct free and fair election to be sure that we will get legitimate elected president or parliament. So that's from my side.
Thank you so much, and thank you for all your efforts to unite civil society around making this position public and known to the international society, international community. I just posted the link in the chat to the statement that you referred to. I believe there's only a Ukrainian version at the moment. Maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but I haven't found the English version. If there is one, it would be great to get it from you maybe later after the event. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's very promising to see so much unity around this issue in the Ukrainian society, despite all the hardships, all the heavy toll that Ukrainians are facing during the war. They're united around this issue because it's so obvious and so critical. Hello, can I get to you now? Building on what Vita said about the legal background, legal background around the elections, can you please elaborate on the legal constraints and legal constitutional constraints on elections during wartime, and what does Ukrainian legislation say about the possibility of postponing elections during the martial law? And also, what are the risks of holding elections outside the constitutional framework, which is obviously what would need to happen if Ukraine was pressured to conduct them now? The floor is yours, Mikhail.
Sure, thank you. Hello, thanks for having me. The constitution and the law, Ukrainian constitution and Ukrainian law is really unambiguous about this, and they prohibit any elections during martial law. It's as simple as this. Moreover, they provide answers to what should happen and shouldn't happen if we need elections, right? Because the Constitution says we have to hold every 5 years. We have to hold elections of the president and the parliament. And since they're not there, but they say if there's martial law, then basically they stay until the new elections are possible. I don't want to very much dig into the details. I want to say as a leader of the civil society organization that's quite deep in advocacy, we would really, really like to hold elections, because you see how we really need them in terms of we'd rather renew our parliament, which is in many ways now dysfunctional. We can't vote for really progressive laws that we need. We selected them in 2019 and so on, but we cannot. We're very well aware that we cannot do that right now. And however, we'd like to see a new, more adequate parliament that would respond, more adequately to the needs of Ukraine and its people right now. We absolutely wholeheartedly supported several statements like this. The one that I think a year or two ago we signed that one. We didn't sign this one just because of technical reasons. We were somewhere else. We couldn't respond in time, but we wholeheartedly support what's written there, because again, you cannot simply hold elections during the war. And my colleagues already expressed why. But for me, the legality is one thing. And let me be clear, we cannot even change the law, because the Constitution explicitly prohibits changing the provision of the law that prohibits the elections during wartime. And the Constitution itself has the safeguards against changing the Constitution during the wartime. So in that sense, it's there specifically to prevent the scenarios like this. Then somebody comes, a foreign aggressor, and says, hold elections, do whatever, because of the war, and it's there because it's there to prevent the situations like this. So we legally we cannot, and from a point of view of common sense, we should not, because again, it is there to protect us from delegitimizing our power, our government. If we look now at the recent figures, we see how actually this aggression towards Zelensky himself, this sort of calls to try and delegitimize him, to remove him, actually rounded up people in support of Zelensky. I think it jumped about 20%. His support rate, it's now just below 70% or something like this. And I think it hasn't been higher since 2022 when the big war started. will we have more legitimate power selected unconstitutionally, illegally, with 8 million people, about that, on the occupied territories, 8 million people outside of the country because they're outside of the country, and they will not be able to participate in the elections because I think it's about 5% that it's like a really low percentage of the people who are registered with the consulates and everything. So it's just the logistics of that is impossible to vote abroad. So it's a huge chunk of Ukrainian people who will not be able to select to participate, to vote. But that's not even the biggest part of it, in my view. I think the worst part of it, the most dangerous part, is the million Ukrainian service people who are now fighting on the front line, to whom we will say basically, keep dying for us on the front line, and we will decide our common future without you. And this, I think, is something that the enemy is really aiming at, because they cannot defeat us on a battlefield. As you can see, more than 3 years, they have some small things that they're moving, but they're really they can't capture the whole country. They can't defeat the country. They can't eradicate the country through military means. That is why they are trying to destabilize the country and really crush the country from the inside with this sort of. And it's no wonder that Russia, one of top Russian sort of demands and priorities in this sort of negotiation process is holding elections, because that's the way to tear the country apart. And that's why we shouldn't absolutely engage in such thing. Thank you very much, and I'll be happy to answer questions. And I'm sorry if I have to run a little bit earlier than this ends, because also I have to be at some other place. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you so much, Mikhailo. And building on what you said about the unity that was demonstrated by the Ukrainian society, especially after the recent attacks on President Zelensky, on the institution of the Ukrainian president, basically, it makes me wonder whether those who push for elections in order to basically get rid of Zelensky will achieve anything, because it is very likely that in the next election, Zelensky will also score quite high if he doesn't get elected. They will get the same person they don't want to negotiate with. So, but still, even that aside, elections will still have a very strong destabilizing potential. So they are a very dangerous idea in any event. Thank you again, Mikhailo. Valeria, can I ask you about your recent publication with Josh that we referred to in the beginning of this roundtable? Can you please summarize your basic ideas and thoughts and arguments against elections at the moment? Can elections be an act of democracy in the midst of the war? And if not, then how to best communicate this to Ukraine's international partners?
Thank you, Elena. Good afternoon, colleagues. We put this event together because Ukraine is facing a serious threat right now. Lately, more and more individuals, politics have been talking about elections. It's really important that we all understand what this actually means. Not holding elections is not a step away from democracy. It's about protecting it and ensuring that future elections are truly fair. Holding elections during a war isn't just difficult, it's a huge risk for Ukraine as a country. Elections need to be safe, giving all citizens an equal chance to vote, allow fair competition, and be protected from outside influence. Right now, none of this is possible. Around 10 million Ukrainians, 1 in 4 people, would be able to vote like they normally would. The war has taken that right away from them. 7 million people had to leave their homes, either moving within Ukraine or going abroad. Another million are on the front line fighting. We can just ignore these people and take away their right to vote. That wouldn't be real democracy. And if we look at what Ukrainians actually want, the answer is clear. Most people are against election during the war. polls show that 63% are strongly against it. So just last week, over 100 civil society organizations, some of the biggest and most respected in Ukraine, also spoken out against holding election right now. So we need to be very clear. This isn't just about election. It's about Ukraine's future and the rights of its people to make a real choice. That is why we have experts and civil society representatives here today, people who truly understand the situation, and it's important that our international partners understand it too. So let's be honest, Russia, which have been interfering in election for years, will never allow Ukrainians to hold fair elections. There will be interference, bribery, intimidation, and every possible tools will be used to make sure Ukraine cannot conduct elections properly. And as of now, Ukraine doesn't have the capacity or resource to defend against this, because all our efforts are focused on the front line. That's all from me. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Valeria. Yeah, this is a very important analysis, and we hope that the publication will have a very broad outreach and will contribute to changing the narratives around elections in Ukraine. I think we can now turn it over to our media partners to the Q&A. So if we have any questions at the moment, we can take them. Let's see if we have any.
Great, thanks. Yeah, any questions, feel free to sort of raise your chat hand or just unmute and we can get questions for the speakers.
It's Laura Rosen. Can I ask something?
Yes, great, thank you. Can you just
Thank
say
you.
your name and outlet again?
My name is Laura Rosen. I currently write the Diplomatic Substack and I'm a member of the Just Security Editorial Board. Thank you. This was incredibly helpful. I don't know who wants to take it, if anyone, but you know, have been disturbed by people in the U.S. administration like Tulsi Gabbard and Vance, both expressing almost Russian talking points, Russian narrative, Russian positions on this issue. And have you all heard that? And also, I don't know if you all recall from Trump's first term that many people around Trump were advising various Ukrainian political candidates, Giuliani and Paul Manafort and others. And have you all seen the presence of people in Trump's circle in Ukraine advising candidates, you know, opposition candidates or people who might be Kremlin friendly candidates? Thanks.
I can address that. Great question, Laura. I mean, it has been relatively consistent that there's a group of populists in the United States who use Kremlin talking points and tend to think about Ukraine almost from the same lens through which they look at purely domestic issues of wanting to it's essentially the anti-Ukraine side. It's not even pro-Trump or pro a deal. It's the, you mentioned Vance, Gabbard, Don Jr., sometimes Elon Musk, is in this vein of, it seems, just wanting to see Ukraine hurt, and it's a little bit kind of like the way that they approach the, like, what they call the woke left, the cruelty is the point. Like, there is that group. Now what they are not working towards, is not evidence of those individuals working towards, is what the people who are in control of the negotiating process. Rubio, Waltz, the special envoys are all they seem to be working for a deal that would solidify Trump's foreign policy legacy, a strong and lasting deal. So you're right to kind of see the different internal camps. Some of them, like Vance, and the way that he was behaving in the Oval Office, really pandering to the MAGA crowd. He may have his own political ambitions and interests looking down the road. But at the moment, I'm thankful that the leaders who are looking out for a strong and lasting deal that would solidify Trump's foreign policy record are the ones who Trump seems to be empowering in the negotiating process.
If I may, yeah, thank you. I'm not sure I understood. Sorry, it was breaking a little bit, but we recognize there are different groups. However, these are the U.S. policies, right? So the one thing that resonates with me that's in Ukrainian sort of discourse lately, that it's, and of course we do differentiate. We see different voices. We understand this is not, not all the Americans are like this, but these are the current U.S. policies. The U.S. withdrew intelligence, and we had missile strikes, right? And people died. The U.S. withdrew other things, USAID money that were vital for many things. Political support for reforms and changes, and which is already hurting and will hurt even more, that are vital for Ukraine's transformation and establishing a strong democracy. So whatever is the agenda, I'm not a political analyst. I can't really tell what is in the core of the actions of certain people. Certain decisions already have been made, and I think since we have a really strong incentive to continue existing, I think we will. The question is, what will be the outcome, and how this will register and continue in our not only intergovernmental, inter-country, but inter-people relations. So needless to say, I have to be careful about this, and it doesn't look like people who are in charge are really careful about this. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Sorry, go ahead, Elena.
No, I was wondering if we have any other questions, and thank you, Josh. Thank you, Mihailo, for your comments. Do we have other questions? If not, then I wanted to address another reason why elections are a dangerous idea at the moment. Many civil society organizations that would normally monitor elections and would prepare election observers are defunded at the moment, because many of these organizations were heavily funded by American partners, including USAID. Do we have any backup plan? I mean, what can these organizations do to mobilize funding among other donors, and how significant is this risk for them at the moment? I mean, if they cannot participate in election observation, if they cannot prepare observers, then how significantly can this impact potential elections if they are to take place, and if there's no civic control and civic monitoring of this process? Maybe Vita or Mihailo could address this.
I can take this question. So organizations who are working with election, they had from like 20 to 80% of funding from US. So now they are trying to reorganize their budgets. As far as I know, there is clear support from European donors. Some of them are acting through the European Commission. Some of them are working through the embassies, and they are handling this niche because they do understand the importance of civil society oversight towards election. But there is also another gap that elections, it's a huge part of monitoring and having this dual voting counting, and that's important. But also it's important preparation of the actors to vote election. As far as I know, the National Democratic Institute, they are US-based organization, and also Electoral Foundation for International Foundation for Electoral System. They also founded in United States. They are closing their offices in Ukraine. It's affect not only support to civil society organizations who've been working in the area of the election, but also to political parties, because they were training political parties. They were helping them at the pledge and campaigning, training on fundraising and all that stuff. And we do understand that new parliament will have many different players, many different parties. So there is a lack of this capacity building support to new political forces which arise. So here it's extremely important to get European Union support and take this sector and assure that we will have all the capacity building, that we will have civil society who can monitor elections, and we will have opportunity to bring international observers. That's from my side. I see Mihailo and Josh also would like to contribute.
Thank you, Vita. Thank you so much.
Go ahead, Mihailo.
No, you go ahead, Josh. You go first. Thanks. I just talked for a while, so I think it's fair.
Okay, sure. It's a great question. I mean, clearly, foreign aid is necessary, especially in a country like Ukraine, to sustain its societal resilience. Certainly to run an election, but even without an election, the thrust of U.S. foreign aid that is now currently frozen in Ukraine was actually around energy and keeping the lights on around the country, which is critical to the country being able to have the resilience that it needs to get through and sustain, whether it's a ceasefire or not. I was happy to see the Jeddah agreement not only reactivate security assistance, but also make a reference to the need to humanitarian efforts. And Secretary Rubio mentioned that in his comments afterwards as well, that now he's going to be taking a look at that. I think that's really smart, because halting humanitarian aid and civil society work in the middle of total war is just devastating. I mean, the wartime services that have had to close are first responders, border infrastructure, evacuation routes, community repairs, and refugee shelters that help families stay in Ukraine, like medicine, veterans offices, and like on the civil society side, anti-corruption projects. And so there have had to be, stoppages of key processes like selecting honest leaders for customs and the anti-corruption court. I'm sure Mihailo could tell us all about that. The third-party monitors that America had embedded within the armed forces to ensure that weapons are actually going to their proper destinations. That's not part of the security assistance, but having reactivated security assistance, you're going to want those eyes to make sure that the U.S. taxpayer money is protected. And we could go on, like investigating war crimes, malign cyber programs. There's a ton of programs that without those going back on, Ukraine will not be able to keep pace with Trump in having the wherewithal in negotiations with Russia to ensure that any deal endures through the ages. We had a piece on this recently. Laura, you mentioned being one of the leaders at Just Security, which we appreciate. This is a Just Security piece, and it is just as relevant as ever right now, this morning, because we're hearing today that basically Putin thinks America is bluffing on this ceasefire deal and is not interested in signing it. And so right now, what could happen today to show Moscow that this deal is the only game in town? It is the ceasefire agreement that the United States will be implementing on its end, working with Ukraine, upholding its side of it, and the Ukrainians are going to be holding up. The simple step that we could take here in Washington would be to attach a big Ukraine aid supplemental to any government funding bill, military assistance, and the humanitarian aid and civil society support that Marco Rubio is talking about. I mean, those pieces he could actually, doesn't have to wait for the legislation, could turn it back on from Foggy Bottom and then get additional money for the security assistance in, a continuing resolution that has to come within the next couple of days. So we're in a perfect opportunity to show Putin that Trump is serious.
Yeah, thanks. I can only second what Josh just said. I fully agree. There's this phrase, vibrant Ukrainian civil society, that is often used, and I think it's for a reason, because it is, the reforms and the changes that are necessary and that are vital, they are usually advocated by designed and advocated by the civil society, and without these groups that exist in non-governmental groups, rarely anything big works in terms of reforms and necessary changes. So, and the reason for this was always, one of the reasons at least, is that the U.S. funding, which was a huge part of the market, so to say, now it's gone, and which means, and we talked with the partners here. You colleagues remember, I think that we actually need several times that in order to progress on all fields, to EU integrate, to establish the institutions, to be less dependent on a foreign aid in the future. Now, as we of course we can't talk about this right now. It's a matter of survival now for the sector, because honestly, for many it was, 60-80% the US funding. For us personally, it was smaller than that, but now we have to fundraise now for further, and I'm not so sure that we will be able to. So because the huge part of the money is just taken away from the market, and it's not enough for everybody. So it's a huge blow, and I don't know how we'll get through this. There's certain things that the US and the others do, but it can't be done in a moment, the way it was withdrawn from the picture. So it's really a big challenge. And again, I have to reiterate: rule of law reforms, anti-corruption efforts, other systematic changes are not only desirable, not only because we want to go to the EU, they're vital to win this war. They're vital for Ukrainian survival, because we want to have proper institutions. We made big progress lately, again, because of the US being involved. But now since it's not there, God knows what happens. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mikhailo. Do we have any other questions at the moment? I wanted to ask, I guess Josh would be the best one to answer, or to maybe share your thoughts on this. I'm not sure there's a definitive answer to this. Do you think this pressure that Ukraine is experiencing is rather a misunderstanding of Ukraine's reality, or is it a deliberate part of the political process on all sides? I mean, on Russia's side, I think I know the answer, but when it comes to the US and other foreign partners, do you think that there's any part of this that is due to an honest misunderstanding of how elections can actually affect Ukraine's democracy?
It's hard to say. I do think that the narrative around hold elections, is out of concern for democracy. Of course, a democracy should hold elections. It sounds compelling. It is easy to hook any freedom-loving people into that narrative. So yeah, I wouldn't dismiss the possibility that there are leaders in the West who hear that and support it, and maybe don't get briefed further in with the conversation that we're having right now, to understand that it just doesn't make sense. I mean, with these types of things, with targets of malign influence operations, which is what this is, Kremlin narrative, there's the whole range. There's the completely unwitting, there's those who kind of deliberately turn a blind eye, and then there's the cynics who absolutely know that it's a geopolitical cudgel that's used as a weapon of political warfare. So, a whole range.
Thank you, Josh. Yeah, it sounds like it's a combination of all these factors. I have another question that I think Vita would be best placed to answer about the state of Ukrainian institutions. I mean, at some point, elections will take place, and they will, and the election process, the pre-electoral process, will inevitably create some divisions, some additional pressure on the Ukrainian institutions, and then the reshuffle of political elites in these institutions will be another test on the resilience of Ukrainian government and the parliament and the president's office, and on ministries, and I mean all the way through the Ukrainian bureaucracy. How do you think we should already prepare for this? I mean, what are the ways to strengthen Ukrainian institutions so that they can be more capable, so that they have less political influence, or I mean, less prone to political influences from the elites, how to staff them better. There's obviously a shortage of personnel in the government sector at the moment, and it's increasingly difficult, from what we can see, to attract qualified personnel. What can be done to address all these challenges so that institutions are ready for the next election whenever it takes place? Vita, I don't know if you...
Yeah, thank you, Elena, for the question. Maybe Mikhailo will contribute afterwards, but yeah, I can divide that for two blocks, because there are institutions which will be responsible for electoral process and electoral administration. It's like Central Election Commission and National Agency for Corruption Prevention. Now they are preparing to the elections. What kind? Some of them, like Central Election Commission, they are developing. They are updating registered of voters. That's quite important, because we have to know where people are there. We're going to be voting. As Mikhailo told, there are issues with the consular registration, because Ukrainian refugees are not registered abroad, and we have a couple of billion people there, but only a couple 100,000 people registered. So if they are not registered, we have to find reasons, like legal reasons for them to vote. So this work, it's quite challenging, and it's still in the progress. We were talking about U.S. funding, and this institution, they also been affected by the dismissal of American support. So now other European institutions and European countries are trying to contribute to this area so they can continue their work. Also, they started some training activities. They are planning, let's say, training activities for the personnel who will be responsible for election administration. And here some difficulties may apply, because there are some discussion if we have like presidential election first, afterwards parliamentary. It's a bit different type of administration. And do we have the open list system as it's stated in the electoral code, or parliament will invent something different? So they are in the process, and that's okay. And they because all the preparation couldn't be done within 1 month or 2. They need more time, especially the same with the National Agency of Corruption Prevention, because they will be responsible for monitoring of financial resources and campaign funding. So they are also working on that. The separate track is Parliament, because Parliament should take a leadership within the development new framework for legislation, because we have to adopt rather a new law on after war election or something like this, to regulate a lot of issue regarding the elections of parliament, working on that. And on many issues, there is consensus inside the parliament and different political parties, but some issues are quite controversial. You were also talking about this balance we have with the office of president and parliament and cabinet of ministry. Yes, it exists. And the office of presidents became a center of decision making in the country. Yes, it happened, but from like we're trying to, as a civil society, we're trying to make parliament more powerful, and the parliament should take responsibility for the preparation and assuring proper legal framework. Maybe Mikhailo can add about other institutions if I missed something.
Well, there's one institution I can talk about, these courts, that are also essential for, that's just a thing that we do and know about. These are all also essential for the selection process. Currently, we have issues with both the quantity of the judges, the number of judges, because we have a lot of vacant positions, especially in the appellate courts, and of course the integrity of the judges. That's why the whole judicial reform efforts. Both are problems if you want courts to hear election cases properly. So we have to continue with the justice reforms. We have to continue hiring judges. We have to continue selecting the judges to the proper courts, especially the one court that is now just recently voted in the high-level administrative court that also was part of the IMF memorandum and the memorandum with and our obligation before the EU. And again, there's challenges now because these commissions that help select judges, they have international experts, which is the thing that we do in order to ensure integrity and proper selection, that are funded or were funded in many ways by or for a large part by the US government. Not there anymore. So there's a huge challenge for these processes, and I don't know how successful we will be in providing that should elections come, should the consequences be so that we can hold elections, so there's stable peace and all the things that are essential. But I'm not sure whether the judicial system will be ready to get all these claims and other things that arise from the selection process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mikhailo. I think we're almost at time, so we are going to wrap up in a moment, but thank you so much to our speakers. We will post this event on GMF's public platforms to reach an even broader audience, and we will also, with your permission, suggest that journalists who could not participate today reach out to you for individual interviews to go deeper on this topic and to discuss all the risks to holding elections in the coming months. I think, yeah, it's overwhelmingly clear that elections are a very significant risk at the moment. And the most important part, in addition to the legal background around it, is that the Ukrainian society is very united around the idea that elections should be postponed until the conditions are in place, and it should remain up to the Ukrainian society and nobody else, to the Ukrainian people and nobody else, to decide who and whom and when to elect. Thank you very much again, and let's remain in touch, and please stay in touch with our distinguished speakers in the near future. Thank you. Bye bye.